recording. For all of the people that worry and they come in and they sort of tell us that they're worried that Costco is going to take over the world, or that Barnes and Noble is going to take over the world, or that the dreaded A, which is what we call Amazon, is going to take over the world. Well, Amazon's here to stay. So small businesses like the bookstore and the toy store and the gift shops and all of those places are here today because we saw noticeably during the pandemic, people just said, we want our downtown. We want people to do well. We want to still be here. And so we shut the door, turned into a warehouse and plowed through. We did. With the schools kept us alive. The schools have been told, their teachers have been told to come here. So we supply for author events. We still have a lot of author events. Our furniture is rolled into the toy store so to make room for the chairs for these size events. We go across the street. We have Martha Hall Kelly coming for an August event at the library across the street because they'll hold 75 people. And we're putting together a big girl event down at Bethel Cinema. So we find places to have things. We've had A-listers in restaurants. We just kind of, we have WestCon and Sacred Heart students reading an afternoon of poetry on March 19th at the brewery. Now, most of them can't drink, but we just thought it'd be a fun place to go. And it's great. We're really excited because they'll get to meet each other. They'll get to see what each other are doing. And people can kind of go and see what undergrads and grads and their professors are doing, which will be a lot of fun. So that's kind of what we're up to. Hey, Kate, how are you? Honey, do you have a chair? Steve, is there another chair? Yeah, but it's not a chair and there's a couple people coming in. It's one of the reasons I give an introduction is give people a place to find a place to park downtown. So, hey, we're getting a couple chairs. So, poetry, by the way, has become some of our largest events. I was raised by a mother who had us earn our allowance by memorizing a penny a line for poetry. I will never in my life recite the Rime of the Ancient Mariner again. Because I wanted to go to the movies, so I learned the whole damn thing. But poetry is something I feel very strongly about. It connects us in ways that nothing else does. And please also understand that if you have not discovered that on our website, that for 2 years, we hosted an event called Write America, where every single Monday night for 2 years, we had authors in conversation and most of them were poets. And so we had a lot of people sharing their work. And that's what I think an independent bookstore brings to the table, that I just wanted to kind of put it in your ear if you haven't thought of it already. You guys all right? Good. Jack, I got to know Jack. It was a poetry event where we had Amy Naraki and a whole bunch of other people. We have done a poetry series every year, March, April, and May, where it's 2 nights and usually a Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoons were always the best populated. It just seems to be a less complicated time of the week. We didn't do our series this year because everyone who knew David Leff was so saddened by his passing. That David Leff was poet laureate of Collinsville, I believe. And he was just an amazing talent and passed away after back surgery unexpectedly. And so it just dropped us all to our knees. And so we're kind of working our way back. So you're one of the working our way back friends. So I'm very excited. So for those of you who may not know Jack, and I've seen a couple of my friends that may not, Jack Powers is the author of 2 poetry collection, Everybody's Vaguely Familiar and Still Love, which is the book most of you are holding in your hands. His poems have appeared in the Southern Review, Salamander, the Cortland Review, and elsewhere. He won the 2015 and 2012 Connecticut River Review Poetry Contests and was a finalist for the 2013 and 2014 Rattle Poetry Prizes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. meeting soon, and thank you everyone for coming. I'm just gonna start with the first poem in Still Love. It's called Last Act.
And I did mean still love, not still life. Sorry, I said it wrong.
I'm gonna play on that. I deserve it. Last Act. I laughed with my doctor at his patient who said, "I want you to be my last doctor." Imagining him checking off his list of last barber, last mailman, and last mechanic. A dark laugh that ended in a shared sigh at our audacity, at his audacity and ours. At 65, I've started thinking about my last dog, my last house. I figure I have 10 good years left before the marbles go. Time enough to use well for one last act, one new start, but no time to lollygag. My yoga teacher says, breathe, just be. My writing teacher says, cut lollygag. Instead, I look up synonyms and linger in the shilly-shally of now, the dawdle, crawl, the tarry, drag, and lag. The assonance of last act, of sound, slowing time, laughing at marbles and audacity, of planning a last anything. So I started this book when I retired, and I wanted to write short poems. My last book had a lot of long ones, and when I get long poems in my email, I think I was doing this to others. So they're American sonnets, many of them, and I tried to write. The first book was kind of a memoir in verse, and this one is more trying to look at others. So this next one is called on turning 61 for Katie Moyse of you for your Barlow people. On turning 61. Consider this as your heartbeat so steady for so long, you've forgotten you're always counting to its steady bump, bump, bump. Listen to your lungs swell and ease beneath your breast, companions from the moment you popped into the world. You've known the fear, the unfairness, the stranger in the mirror, the thickened tongue, the distance from yourself and everyone. Yet now you sit at this table. Your hale and good husband intent on his own good work. Your children off composing babies in song. Oh, that grandchild grows so fast. And here in this little pond where you spend your days, you are famous. On a first name basis with the only world that matters right now. As you quarter your avocado. Could you be any richer in this moment? Carving out its hard seed, peeling away its dark skin, dicing cubes, green, yellow, just right meat before dropping it in your greens and stealing a bite off the nice fish. I've been fighting laryngitis all week, so I'm gonna drink a lot of water. And my great editor, Betsy Delmonico, when she read the book, she said, I think you need to tell readers why you're writing all these depressing poems. And so I tried to write a poem to put them in context. So this one, and this is where my plan to write sonnets, I started writing half sonnets and double sonnets, and this is like a quadruple sonnet. So I'll kind of pause between each section, but I can't follow my other directions. Called Next. My father loved his house, framing pictures on Christmas cards, often standing in the driveway shadowed by our giant oak, admiring it like it's newborn. Long before the stroke, he'd pause while raking leaves or mowing the lawn and just stare at the house, an ordinary house as far as I could tell. He'd laugh when caught in that absent gaze. I read these photos now like ancient texts, lines of clapboard, shutters like brackets. Did the windows crack the code? He built it, not with his hands, but with his sweat, his capital, squirreled away for the next Great Depression, but unearthed for this one clear monument to how far he'd come from rented claptraps in Springfield, Mass. I'm just guessing. He told us nothing, and we didn't ask. Was he already slipping? Was I too dense to see? I always liked old people. Growing up with two grandmothers didn't leave much choice. There was nothing noble about it. Nanny snuck me cigarettes and Granny laughed at my teasing, making her speak CB language and saying fart. We killed a lot of time together, me waiting for life to start and then for it to end. Dad's slide into dementia somehow softened him, and my mother's slow decline was like Granny Redux. I chat with old neighbors now, learn how things have changed, how they made it through, catching their smiles at my futile pursuit of a greener lawn or a cooler mailbox. I've always loved old people, just never wanted to be one. After Nanny and Granny died, my father knew he was next. With his work and children gone, the house was the one solid thing he could take credit for. Is that it? Once the hubbub of living quiets, where will I cast my gaze? I'm the second son, but his clone, determined to be his opposite, but foiled. At his funeral, old friends dropped off in front, crawled out of back seats like they were climbing out of caskets, steadying themselves on the pavement with walkers or canes. I watched their startled faces when they looked up as I, now silver-haired like my dad, same blue eyes, short nose, height, and bearing, greeted them at the curb. Some wobbled, and I worried they'd go down. I caught one or two by the elbow. Your father, they said. You looked, I thought. Yes, I said, like twins, now knowing I was next. As the oldest son, Donnie gave the eulogy and told a story about his friend Dave Dorn driving by the house in his electrician's truck and seeing my father in the driveway staring at the gutters or maybe the flagstone steps. When he returned an hour later, service call complete, he found my dad still gazing. Donnie told it as one more mysterious dad story, but the church rang with laughter of old friends who knew something we didn't. Outside the church, we shook their hands, wanting to ask, but they were all so sorry, and the funeral seemed to sap them so. They each turned, fell into their back seats, pressed their faces to the windows, and waved goodbye. So you thought it was going to be funny. Maybe that's why she wanted to do it. So I tried to do, I had a friend in class, in this class I took, Alice Romano, who said they were like little portraits with sonnets. And that's kind of where the idea of the cover came from, these little portraits of scenery. So here's one of those. It's called Keeper. A fisherman stands bow-legged in shallow surf, water to his ankles, but beside him stands his miniature, right down to the blue cap. The sun flares yellow above trees already dark with night. House lights flicker on one by one. The fishermen are silent. Even the surf seems to quiet its steady breath. Seagulls ride drafts overhead with a caw, and a school of fluke separates around the wiggling bait in the shape of two hands praying. Father and son gaze at the water, rippling with orange sky, neither willing to let the day in. On the shore, their basket shows a meager haul, a flounder, two blackfish just past the legal limit. None of the blues the father described in bedtime story, once leaping out of the sound, almost jumping into his boat. But this moment, close enough to hear each other breathing with the surf and the breeze, their lines holding the pink of the clouds, imagined blues circling out beyond their casts is enough. Even the boy knows not to speak, just feel the surf and watch the sky turn purple, then black. A lot of these poems, the short ones, were written in a class called Year of the Book at the Hudson Valley Writer Center. And it really was the year of the book. I spent a year and I came in with a poem, and there's a couple that weren't from there, but it was a great class. I recommend it. But then I started kind of messing with the form, and I like long poems is the problem. Hopefully people like to listen to it. So this one's called Where Was Your Mother? Hors d'oeuvres, I said, and placed a bowl of grapes on the table. Mom, Ellen, and Granny must have looked at me strange, but I was focused on making dinner. cheeseburgers, and cinnamon and sugar-coated English muffins. I narrated as I worked Mom's electric grill. Why did I feel so confident when friends I'd smoked angel dust with had all freaked out? I focused on getting a little char on the burgers while keeping the middle pink, timing the muffins, browning in our little toaster, slicing the tomato. As my friends had wandered Guy's yard crying or laying in his living room floor mumbling at their hands, I decided I need to ride my bike home and cook dinner. Dad was away, so I wouldn't get his "Are you stoned again" look. And Mom could probably use a break. And who wouldn't love grapes and burgers? I centered the burgers on muffins and tomatoes on beds of lettuce and presented each plate with a silent voila, then sat beside them and dug in. It's like delicious, right? It was. 25 years later at our group 40th birthday party, Dan's wife, Michelle, kept interrupting our crazy stories with, "Where was your mother?" Most of the time, Mom was busy trying to live her own life and following the don't ask, don't tell policy that kept us from arguing all the time. But for the bowl of grapes dinner, she was sitting to my left. Did she look at her wild-eyed teen son, hair in a frizzy ponytail, and think, "Shall I call someone?" Granny laughed at my ate, probably thinking I'd be a chef instead of the priest she'd hoped for. Ellen was probably trying to divert attention from my cryptic babbling and long silences. But Mom, she was a child of the Depression, an adult, the Eisenhower years. The hippies and drugs of the 60s were beyond her understanding. Or was I selling her short? During my delinquent phase in 7th grade, she used to save things up. "Can I sleep at Tommy's?" I asked once on a car ride home. "I've been really good." "What about," she asked, "trying to set old men at school on fire?" We weren't, I said. It was a little fire to burn. We put it out. Remembering all the steam rising from our food that brought the fire truck. Mom turned her eyes back to the road with a little smile. She knew me pretty well. I think I knew when my own kids were stoned, though it could have been just the surliness of teenhood. Would I have interrupted a surprise dinner of grapes and burgers to let them know I knew? I hope not. After the plates were scraped clean, I noticed a half-filled bowl. "The grapes are dessert too," I said. What symmetry. We each grabbed one, bit into the tart green skin. I imagined simultaneous explosions of sweetness in our mouths. We looked out the windows at the yellow forsythia, the squirrel playing in the giant oak, the tomatoes and corn I planted in the yard, all lost in our own thoughts. Where was my mother? Right beside me. So a lot of besides growing, the poems growing longer, they all just started like dropping on lines. They're just, sonnetish is what I'm calling it. Semi-sonnet. And some of them there's something about the 14 lines that I love, or the discipline of it. You know, you really have to start counting syllables to get everything in. And this one's called Unruly Sonnet. I keep trying to corral Amy and Carl into 14 lines, but they break out alone and together. Amy visits us, her daughter, a wounded bird in her lap, says, "Sex hurts. I've got books, flowers, Lizzie. I'm done with love," leaving the details of her drink-demolished marriage unspoken. Then Carl appears, sandy-haired saint, scooping them both in his arms, luring Amy back in the open, humming softly to Lizzie. We all clap in bewildered delight. And just when I've steered them into stanzas, Amy comes north alone, slips me a photo of Carl in a black dress, wearing red lipstick and eyeshadow, says, "She's Colleen now." It's weird to feel her boobs in my back when we spoon. Amy raises a glass to Carl, to Colleen, we drink. She posts photos of crocuses and Kerouac. The turn comes too soon. Amy died Christmas Eve in her sleep, Colleen writes. Lizzie and I are heartbroken. They drive north that summer with ashes. We balance on Amy's old dock. "Say goodbye to Mommy," Colleen whispers to Lizzie, who's curled into her chest. And they shovel cinder and bone in high arcs into the bay. So I want to thank my, my writing group. Some representatives are here. Thank you, writing group. They're taking that area over there, and a former writing group member here. My Barlow colleagues and my neighbors for showing up. Everybody, thank you. And I have another writing group that they were last minute regrets in Norwalk. And really, without the deadlines and the feedback, this book doesn't happen. So I thank you all. All right. Is that only too long? We got for one more long one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So I've always wanted to, you know, where the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. I went with my mother once in probably 2008, and of course I was next to her taking the test. You know, it's a test to see if you start to get dementia. And I was, you know, answering the questions with her. And I always wanted to write about it, and I couldn't figure out. I just had all these really terrible poems. And then I was reading these Frank O'Hara lunch poems, and I realized that's what he said in the beginning. Perfect for the test. So this is prepping for the test. It's 8:30 in Fairfield, yes, August 20th, a Saturday morning, and I'm studying for the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. And like a Frank O'Hara poem, I start with where and when I am. The heat wave is finally broken, and I repeat my name aloud, like I'm mentally checking for 10 fingers and 10 toes, as if just entering the world rather than delaying my departure. The grass is brown because I forgot to turn on the sprinkler, and I repeat the 5 words: face, velvet, church, red, daffodil. I've avoided early death by dune buggy like O'Hara, or renegade jeans like my poor neighbor Andrew, and still dream of a late prime in my mid-60s. Maybe I'd be better off exercising my brain by learning Mandarin, doing puzzles like those nonagenarian nuns in Minnesota. I draw at share, then draw a line from 1 to A and 2 to B in the form I've copied off the internet. I never used to study for tests. Taking the SAT with a hangover, and even taking my driver's test after one quick read through the book. I know better now. The real tests, Anne's breast cancer, raising children, my mother's slow decline, were all pop quizzes I stumbled through. I read the sentences aloud and repeat them, say the 5 words again. Face, velvet, church, red, daisies, and wonder if a story would help. I'm in a church, facing an altar where velvet drapes hang besides the red of Jesus's wounds. The daffodils wave in flower beds out in front. Does this test have a Christian bias? Is a dementia diagnosis one more privilege? My head hurts. And I think of the NFL adjusting their tests for concussion money and depressing Black players' scores. Is dementia also caused by self-induced collisions with booze and smoke and bad genes and too many hot dogs? I balance on one leg as I study to reduce my risk of falling. I name the animals: tiger, penguin, owl, and read the numbers, close my eyes, repeat them aloud. When my friend Eileen was studying to be a school psychologist, I helped her practice giving IQ tests. I messed up the numbers going forward to trying to group them, but remembered more going backwards when I just listened, repeating them like a song. 8, 7, 3, 9, 2, like notes, like a bird call. Trying to remember interfered with remembering. I draw a share, read a list of letters, tap each E, and begin counting backward from 100 by sevens. 100, 93, 86, wondering if there's a pattern I'm missing, bringing myself back to the task. 79, 72, are we all just inventing patterns? And shouldn't I want to know if I have dementia? I repeat the words: face, church, velvet, red, daffodils. Do they need to be in order? Do plurals count? Like O'Hara, I'm sweating now. Out the window, the bird feeder looks empty. Probably shouldn't fill it in summer. Is there a point where you just let nature do its work? I tally the points, 30 out of 30, well past the 25 I need to pass. Feeling tired, calm, like after meditating, hungry, ready to write. Out the window, a cardinal lands in the feeder, finds a last morsel, sings a high sheer, 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 then whip, 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 and flies away. Am I okay with time?
You bet.
All right, great. So a lot of these poems kind of connect in different ways. And these are two that are not actually together, but so one of them appears later in the book, but I'll read them right next to each other. And the first one's called Two Young Lovers. Whenever we got past first base, my ninth grade girlfriend asked, "Do you love me?" What is love, I wonder? More than the lust I burned with on her playroom couch? I don't know, I'd say. And we'd stall again at second base, both lying back, panting, staring at the tiled ceiling, questioning, what did I love? Was it all want? Just tell her yes, my suave friend Sean insisted, like she was asking for a password. Was I the good guy for refusing to lie, or just one more jerk she learned to pass aside and overcome? 50 years later, on this December Sunday, I Google her and find her standing next to the tall, goateed guy who said yes. And then, actually, I'm going to read a poem in between and then come back to that one. So this is another. I was kind enough to reading names that mentioned you, but they're in this one. Anne will have a chance at the end to rebut. We would read it that. It's called Old Couples. Anne asked me to stop sending her pictures. Oh, here's the cute old couple. Anne asked me to stop sending her pictures of cute old couples when I travel. It's depressing, she texted after that's us someday under 80 somethings in Iowa City, walking ahead of me into town under an August blue sky. They'd finally found the same easy pace, she with her walker, he with his cane. My mother groans at the silver-haired couples at her assisted living, reminded of the ache in her hip where dad, even more dementia, had been firmly attached, now only in dreams. Sometimes I watch her sleep, her eyes fluttering beneath pale lids, her fingers curling as if holding a hand. Bob pedals next to me at the town gym, tall, ramrod straight. The caretaker's off today, so his wife sits in a chair by the door, hemmed in by her walker. She thinks she's just returned from her mother's wedding in Toledo. Long trip, I say. She frowns, nods at Bob. Ask him if he's done. She was 19 when I married her, Bob says, when I say it's gotta be tough. He shrugs. It is what it is, what it is, he says. We had 62 good years. I realize we're going into the downer part of it. This one's not. I have a book, a poem that inspired by my friend Dave Motter, my walking partner, called "Leaving a Light On," and the has a quote: "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning," from Viktor Frankl. And this is Dave's the friend. A friend sends a quote he keeps above his desk. He says it's from the Buddha. A person needs three things to be truly happy: someone to love, something to do, and something to hope for. On the bottom of the email, he writes, "Pretty true. When I feed the quote into Google, Tom Bodett pops up as the author, who says, 'We'll leave a light on for you.' I started a theory that love's not enough, that hope is a light we all need to keep blazing. But Elvis and Kant also listed as sources, all jostling for space on my wall of inspirations. I traced the quote to a clergyman, George Washington Burnett, no Buddha, but still pretty true, and curiously close to Viktor Frankl, who searched for meaning, found three paths: find someone to love, find something to do, or suffer nobly, as we hope our suffering serves a purpose. Except Burnett, Bodett, and the Buddha demand all three for happiness. I pin both quotes like to-do lists above my desk. Keep cultivating love, find something to do, hope for happiness, knowing I'll get my chance to suffer." And then, all right, well, this is down actually. So there's about 10 poems between this and the previous one I read. It's called Love Again. 50 years later on this December Sunday, I Google and find her standing next to the tall goatee guy who said yes. The next image shows her book about what to do when this man you've waited decades for writes you a note, balances the accounts in the desktop, leaves, comes back to open an old Valentine's card on the screen, hoping it's the first thing you'll find when you learn he's gone, drives off and parks close enough to the Veterans Hospital for his organs to be shared. And how to crawl, then kneel, then struggle upright, to use psychics and poets, the Buddha and blessings, gurus and God, the grass beneath your bare feet, and writing the book, Step Back into the Light. About how to grieve, yes, but also how to love yourself enough to come through it, how to push and how to fall backward, trusting the world to catch you. And the opposite arc of her first love story, she moves from sun into darkness, making it back most days to partly cloudy, ready to be loved again. All right, two more. So these are the last two. And some of these, this is where sometimes you just think, oh, this story had to be a sonnet. And this is something I've written about a bunch for years, and I think it finally found its form. It's called Tough Love. As you can see, I'm dying, the professor said to open our first class. His face, worn to gray skin and bone, left no doubt. Ridged brow shadowed his dark eyes. 14 weeks, you'll learn about group therapy by doing, he said. He stared down questions. The stillness demanded secrets. After 30 minutes, a shaggy-haired guy said, I'm having an affair with a patient. The professor nodded and the details spilled out. The next week, an hour in, an ex-nun confessed she'd aborted her child. Oh, you must have, I began, but his glare shut me down. She told us everything. Each week, we sat in silence until someone cracked. I'd interrupt, offer them a chance to reconsider. He'd scowl. One night, we waited, a grim shadow in the fluorescent hall, and said, stop trying to save everyone. I nodded. They need to speak. After we got into our dark cars, he lit a cigarette. The orange flared on his skeletal face. The next week, we learned he was dead. Our talk echoed strangely in the room. We want to finish class like he taught us the other day, and then sat in the hammer of silence until someone split open. And then before I judge you all, and we're not ending there. The last poem is called Surrender. The river was higher than when we forded it in the fall, but it was late, and this wide bend in the Housatonic was still the shallowest spot. So we re-cinched our tents and bags, strapped on our packs, and under a cloud-shrouded moon, began crossing. Guy first, then Tom and Sarah, me at the rear for cleanup. At 16, camping had become the only time I wasn't fighting to make my life my own. Guy crossed like a summer stroller, but the lovebirds wobbled. Keep your head down, I shouted, above the river's roar. Test each step, they screamed at the current. Be the river, I yelled. They laughed, slowed, clapped hands, alternated steps. I walked in a low stance, spotting with arms held wide. Sarah, then Tom climbed up the opposite bank with a whoop and a yes. And I relaxed and looked up as the moon broke free of clouds and laid a rippling sword of reflection right down the river into my gut. With an oof, I fell back, floating, surrendering to the current, a contented speck of the quick river, white moon, black night. Thank you. Question.
Question, anybody have any questions?
Did you ever find out what your father was staring at and why?
Well, I've talked to other people who've said, I'd never heard this term before, but they said, oh yeah, he was house proud.
Oh, absolutely.
And I was like, house proud. House proud. But evidently, everyone else knows. what house proud is.
Well, if you've been in an apartment and you drove to buy your first, well,
Yeah,
it's one of the most traumatic
right.
experiences. And then after a while, it's like, oh, it's mine.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's
Well,
mine.
every Christmas, once, I don't know, we were certain, her grandchildren in the cards, I don't know. He sent Christmas cards with a picture of the house until my mother said, no more cards. So he took a picture of the mailbox. We love that house. If I could only find a house like that. I love mine. Any
In the poem Tough Love, and you may have already said this in our writing group, but I apologize if I forgot. What was the specific class that you were taking? Was it for like a master's or?
Yeah,
was
it's for a
some
master's, and it was,
therapy?
it was part of, it was part of the counseling school, and it was called sensitivity training, but I was getting a master's in special ed. And I was taking a couple of lectures. I kind of entertained the idea of being a therapist, and I thought, "Yeah, this is just too much." Do this for 50 minutes, and then he writes a note, and I go, hi, next patient. So, I thought about it, but yeah, it was at Southern Connecticut, and it was pretty intense.
Jack,
Yes,
can I ask Ann a question?
you can ask Anne.
I'm just wondering how you, when Jack writes about you, do you exercise any editorial powers? And
I tried. No, I did kind of have a conversation.
All
You
of
gotta
the
run it by me before.
poems in this book were vetted by Anne.
Yeah.
So I try to do that because
A
this,
couple of times I got caught off guard at readings
yeah,
where I wasn't asked, are you gonna, and it wasn't anything terrible, but it was just like, yeah, I probably wouldn't have wanted that.
yeah.
So we learned, we discussed it and figured out, oh yeah, like you need to run it by me before.
Which I think is a good idea. And like a lot of these poems, the first book was like looking at my life. This is looking at more at other people. I tried to pass it by them if I
And
could,
yes, like.
or
other-
change,
Like our kids or whatever.
Yeah.
say.
or if I couldn't do that, I changed their names and changed things a little bit, because it's their, I mean, that's even more obviously their story. If it's something Ann and I did together, it's sort of like, actually, my youngest son, I was gonna use something to end one of the poems. And he said, that's my story, you can't use it. And I said, well, this other one is with Zach. Well, you and Zach were there, but this story, you weren't even there, so it's my story. It's like,
Oh, okay.
that's the problem with asking people, they can say no.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
That's gonna be tricky.
right. Well, usually they're no longer talking about other people.
Right, that's right.
So that, I try to avoid that, old Irish playwright thing with dying alone and drunk, because you alienated your entire family. George, I just realized that was you. Hello. How are you? Well disguised. Thank you for coming.
When you write, your books seem to be organized where you have certain types of poems in the beginning and then you said you're entering the bummer section. Do you write that way where you'll, for a few months, you're writing kind of depressing poems, or are you jumping around and you're writing multiple things at the same time?
Yeah, I'm jumping around. I think with this one, my poetry teacher called it my poetic obsession. I was writing some more depressing poems. But then I said, I just write way too many poems.
I only said depressing because you used the word. I
Right.
didn't find them depressing.
Right, but they're darker.
Yeah,
Right.
darker, yeah.
And I sometimes, just for myself, I said, I gotta write about the Bola graves.
Yeah.
I have this need, something, out of that. And then they're ordered. I tried to order them to have, they're not in the order I wrote. At all.
Right.
So I tried to order them to have some kind of part.
Is it at all cathartic for you, or is it mostly just descriptive of things that happen?
I think it's pretty cathartic, and I didn't realize that until like when each of my parents died, my brother when he wrote, the eulogy for my dad. He has like so many issues still with my dad. I just like, I worked it all out. I mean, he did the best he could. I really didn't have, you know, I felt like the end would kind of hold it together. And, I had to go through and I literally crossed out 20% of his eulogy. Like, you can't say, you can't say. So this one, we left this one in because it seemed kind of innocent. It turned out to be the funniest part of his eulogy. And my sister too, but my older sister too, has had stuff, and I think this must be it, because I've written about it, I've gotten some distance. I've formed things into, you know, sense in a way. Like, Where Was Your Mother? Those pieces are totally separate. It was in the writing of that all those pieces came together. And my goal when I'm writing is to not just execute a plan. I want to end up at a surprise. I want to end up somewhere where I go, "Oh, where'd that come from?" So that line that ends that appeared about two lines earlier. I was like, "Oh, that's it." That's right. And that's what I think, you know, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader, but no surprise for the reader. Not interesting. Why read it? You want those moments you go, "Let's see this one." Yeah.
When you write, do you sit down and say, I'm gonna write a poem now, or do you like, have Kleenexes in the car that you write lines on and put it on later?
Yeah.
How do you go about that?
No Kleenexes, everything. Sometimes I'll have lines of things in my head, but what I try to do, one of the great things about retiring is that I get up, you know, I've been sleeping a lot later, but I was getting up at 7 and writing for a few hours every morning, and a lot of crap, a lot of terrible stuff. And I think, you know, that was the old pre-writing motto, but I took another class with a woman, Diana Getch, and she was just like, deliberately write trash. That's the only way to get, you know, to something surprising. And then until you just stumble into something and then kind of follow it carefully, like you're following a thread that you don't want to snap. And so those are the best days, but there's a lot of days of really terrible stuff. And there's lines and things that just don't work, like the Montreal cognitive assessment. There are so many bad starts to trying to write that poem or write it as an essay or write it as something else. And just, I think Frank O'Hara saved me that one.
Do you handwrite or?
No, I used to for a long time, but now, yeah. Because otherwise I'm just, my handwriting is not very good, but also, I don't know, I think I can type. In fact, it slows me down a little bit to type. I'm not a great typist, so that it lets me kind of start seeing what might be ahead rather than just do.
I've only known you as a poet, so other writing.
Do you do it? Oh, yeah, yeah. I started out writing, I was talking about this before. I started out writing when I was teaching the self-contained special ed class, and I was supposed to be teaching the kids how to write. They didn't want to do anything. And I went to Bard, and one of their principles was you write with your students. So we all wrote personal stories, kind of started to shape them into essays. They all wanted to tell their stories. Often what they read took a lot longer to read than the number of words that were on the page. But it was, I got that, I don't know if they're still writing, but I am. And then I started writing fiction, and I took a course at Sarah Lawrence for in poetry craft, because I thought I needed to work on my language, and that led to another one, and then eventually I got to a point too where my kids were at an age I couldn't hold a novel in my head. You know, I could hold a poem in my head. That was good. So I switched to poetry completely. But lately I've been writing these like 2-page flash fiction kind of sci-fi stories. I don't know where it's gonna go, but I'm having a lot of fun.
That's when you have somebody find you an illustrator.
Right, and I also have written a couple of novels, and I think my timing's off, like people aren't saying, I wonder what an old white guy's like is like.
Well, I mean, and the special ed, this contains class.
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about publishing in general. I mean, the publishing world has changed dramatically in the last 10 years and even more so in the last 3. For people to get published, it's in any form. It's worthy of celebration because it's very difficult these days. Mainstream publishing is usually 2 to 5 years to get your book into print. That's normal. That's always been the case. I can't tell you the number of self-published folks that say, I don't need an editor. I just really want to get it out there. And I go, okay.
That's fine.
And when they come to me and show me their book, say, we can't carry it. Because our store can't carry self-published work because either they get the profit or we can stay open. So there's some of the dilemma in the publishing world of how to support people that are doing great work and other people and how to discern what is good and what isn't. And also I'm limited by size, of course, so it's easier for us to just go, no can do,
Well, like, how did you find the?
except with poetry.
How
Except
did I
with
find
poetry.
this?
Yeah, how did you find this publisher and how do you know them?
So I actually, someone I had worked with, Amy Holman's also a Hudson Valley writer person, is kind of has, this is kind of what her, she's an advisor on finding magazine, journals to publish in and small publishers for poets. And so she gave me about 6 publishers and I got one bite on that. Because there's lots of little publishers, but it's hard to figure out, you know, who is gonna like your stuff. But also it's hard, it's just, I always feel like it's just like throwing darts in the dark. I don't know who's gonna respond.
Some of it is.
Yeah,
Some of it actually is. But usually what I suggest to people that are looking to find a small publisher, and there's a growing interest in small publishers right
Yeah.
now also. What I usually tell people is if you find a book that is like
Right.
what you want yours to look like,
Yeah.
find out who they published, who their agent is, the
Yeah.
whole, who they think.
Yeah,
And that may be a place to start,
right.
kind of dip a toe.
Yeah.
You know, the production values of this are good. So I mean, that's one of the things that we look at is people that have sort of done it all themselves and oh, my 5-year-old did the pictures. You know, that kind of stuff just has a limited audience, let's put it that way. But no,
Yeah, that's, I mean, with publishing individual poems, when I read a poem that I love, I think, oh, where else would like this person?
Right.
This is a sense, they have a sensibility like my sensibility, and the same carries over to publishing books.
the key for us is, I mean, this is sort of insider baseball. Ingram is the largest distributor in the country. It's not a publisher, but they distribute small press and large press. And they're the largest in the country. If you're listed on Ingram, it's what people's our website for every independent bookstore in the country. So Ingram is a gateway to being able to pick up a couple little pieces, you know, not having to order a case lot from your
Right.
publishing house. So that makes it available to people in a way. You're on Ingram, so that makes it available to the general public by virtue of the fact that you are on the list. I mean, in the warehouse.
Right. And Golden Antelope it's a mom and pop. Woman
But I've
and
heard
her
of them
husband,
before.
and they just love books and they have a range of stuff that they do and very enthusiastic. And also like, when you were saying about people saying, I don't need an editor. I do need it. But she read through these, she had another reader and they made all these suggestions and I need that perspective because I
Right.
am the worst judge of my own writing. That's where writing groups are really handy. A lot of times I come to writing groups though. See if anybody likes this.
That's what I was impressed by.
I had fun writing it.
Well,
The writing
to the
group
exception
talked
rather
about
than
the
the
Hudson Valley.
The Hudson Valley Writers Center has a courses and they're a group of people. But I have a writing group that we started in 1986 from the Connecticut Writing Project Summer Institute. And Dell was gonna be here, so he and I are the original members. And we keep, if someone drops out, we get another member from the writing project. There's 6 of us now, 7 of them. Right?
All I know is I had to wait 2 years.
Did we any waiting list? So writing groups are great, because you do get the, the same kind of perspective. But I think sometimes we're almost like, we're just fans of each other's stuff at this point. So like when Bill's about to read something, like, what's Bill got? So we're primed to really like it. So having someone who doesn't know who I am, they're reading it fresh for the first time. That's really giving information.
That's quality work, and I applaud you for doing that, and having an avenue where you could be collegial with it is very rare and precious. So people that have sort of found that little place where you can share fine work and then get published, it's great.
Laurel Peterson actually gave me.
I was just gonna say,
Laurel and Dan are
Uh-huh.
in my other rate. And I took a course with Laurel, and after the course, she said, I'm starting to write.
she's in our puddle of poets too.
Yeah,
We've sort of wormed our way into different groups, but most of, hers, is she also the same publisher as you?
no, she's got some, local.
Yeah, she's someone else.
Yeah, she has somebody else, and then Homebound has a great stable. They really do, and it's-
When I was up there, yeah.
So
Yeah, there are people, it's a lot of work. It's an amazing amount of work. I would get emails from Betsy, and they were all like 4 a.m. All right, I finally figured out this problem here, and laying it all out and doing all this stuff. I'm like.
it's a.
That's what you want, is you want people excited about
Right.
producing what you make.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And that's, you found that publishing.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Jeff, up to the phone, Still Love.
Yeah,
I'm reading it in 2 different ways here in you talk. How did you come to Still Love? As
I could read the poem.
Oh, see, I haven't
Title
cracked open
poem?
the book yet.
I'll give you the
Yeah,
title poem.
All right.
But I can do it as a title because I thought it worked in lots of different ways.
Mhm.
But the original poem was, and this is when I was really like trying to tell other people's stories. I changed the name. Old friend of mine. Still Love. I was her rebellion. Ben drinks his beer, and she was my shot at normalcy. He lasted 10 years. He sighs, sips again. She got over rebelling, and I guess I couldn't be normal. The smile suggests the last part is a joke, or at least a funny truth. But his story, listing all the moves and arguments, leaves out those moments when it worked, or they believed it worked. And they laughed or made love. It's the end, he recalls, when she told their therapist, don't listen to him, he's evil. Yet she got him to the doctor and he said, I just want to dive in the ocean and keep swimming. Wasn't that still love?
Oh, wow.
So that, that was just a gift, and I went home with this story. Amazing story. So the title reads in a lot of different ways, I hope.
It does.
Yeah. And even with you said still life, that idea of capturing this story, this moment.
I just spent a week going to art museums, so sorry, I looked at a lot of still lifes.
Yeah.
No, that brings some memory, so it's.
Yeah,
So it's-
that's all right.
Yeah, it's all right.
I'm looking at it now. All right, well, I want to thank you all. for
Thank
coming.
you all, and
I
thank
want to-
you.
for
No,
hosting,
of course,
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is great.
this is awesome. I appreciate it.
If you want the book, Alice has some books.
And I'm sure Jack would sign them
Signature, I-
if he hasn't already.